Welcome to 5G Techritory, and we will now join the panel discussion that is dedicated to a very hot topic. Related to 5G, there are different concerns. Few say it's bad for health, some would say it's privacy issues there, and this panel would focus on 5G, data privacy and ethics dilemma. The panel would be moderated by Graham Thomas from the company Cognizant. Graham, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, so you can take over from here.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to have the panel today, and I'm delighted that we have our panelists with us today. As you said, my name is Graham Thomas. I'm the Global Head of Data Privacy and Ethics at Cognizant. And on the panel this afternoon, I'm very lucky to have, starting with Miko Neva, who is the Global Privacy Officer for Vodafone. I have Frank Wagner, who is Vice President of Group Privacy for Business Services and Infrastructure at Deutsche Telekom. I have Dario Betti, who is the CEO of the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. And I have Eamon O'Neill, who is the Director of UK RI for the Centre of the Doctoral Training for Artificial Intelligence. So, hello everybody, great to be here. And I'm going to kick off today just to set the scene and get everybody into the topic. So there should be a slide that you can all see here. And what I'm going to go through first of all is to go through what we call the 5G data privacy and ethics dilemma. And the reason that it's a dilemma is that, as you've heard, there's great opportunity with 5G. We're talking about these faster speeds, so you'll have availability of services everywhere at great performance. IoT is going to come alive when we get the low power and we get millions and millions of IoT devices everywhere, all sharing lots of data from the kitchen, from the car, from your clothes, from everywhere. AI is going to reach into its next stage, and we'll hear more about that from Eamon and others during the panel, but certainly all the data that's going to come in is going to drive this. Social networks are going to become potentially more addictive because they're going to get more information and more ability to profile you. Advertising will be real time and contextual. All of a sudden, you'll get things just when you need them, exactly in the different devices that you're using. Location is going to be more accurate. All of these things coming, you'll have different ways to consume media. So you'll have virtual reality, augmented reality, so you'll be able to consume media in completely new ways that we haven't done so much up until now. Healthcare, things like having real time, potentially surgery and operations, things done remotely. So that world's going to change. And then gaming. I mean, from gaming already, from in the home, it's going to move into mobile. It's going to be a completely new dimensions there. And these are just a few of the things that are going to change as we move into 5G in these areas in the next few years. So with all that in mind, it looks really great. And we're going to get an enormous amount of data that's going to come in. But at the same time, we have to keep in our mind what impact that's going to have in terms of data privacy for individuals and for society as a whole. And in particular, data ethics, because now we're moving into automated decision-making and we're moving into the field of AI. And this is introducing ethical concerns that companies haven't had to look at today. And for people, who are privacy officers, not only are they dealing with data privacy now, but they also have to deal with ethical issues and how they're going to manage and be responsible around the data ethics. And as a given, we have data security. And as an underlying part of this, as the technology increases, as we all know, security has to keep up as well as privacy. So from this perspective, lots of things will happen, but these will create potential risks. Now, we're very lucky today to have such panelists. And what I want to do with the panelists is now move to you and to explore this and to see what your thoughts are and what possible, let's say, concerns or issues that you may see around this new 5G technology. So maybe I start off with maybe you first, Miko, and we'll move around the panel and get all of your thoughts.
Well, thank you. So I'm the Global Privacy Officer at Vodafone. When I think of 5G and data ethics, few words come to mind: acceleration, scale, ecosystems. And by those three words, I basically mean that we are going to be facing issues, challenges, dilemmas on an increasing speed. In an environment that there will be new types of ecosystems, the existing ecosystems will be ramping up. So how do we ensure that we are going to be ending up with the types of ecosystems that are good for our customers, that improve our societies, benefit the digital economies, while striking the right balance with the rights and freedoms of the individuals. So to me, the thorniest issue with data ethics tends to be the fact that it's not very tangible. Ethics is a difficult concept. There will be there are many views on what is ethical and what is not. Yet, as a practitioner in a large company, large technology company, it has to be scalable. There needs to be framework, standards, things that make it easy, well, not necessarily easy, but at least predictable and somewhat fast to take these decisions frequently at scale in a predictable manner. So for when I think of my role as the global privacy officer in Vodafone, it has always been a question of scale. We do hundreds of privacy impact assessments in a year. Many of those actually going forward will include an ethics dimension. So how do we do it at scale, where a panel, a committee will not necessarily be the right solutions? So that's my introductory remark perhaps on this topic.
Thank you, Mikko. That's perfect. Thank you. And let's move over to you, Frank, from Deutsche Telekom perspective. What's your view of it? Frank, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Frank Wagner. I'm within Group Privacy for many years. I'm acting as a privacy professional for about 25 years in different positions. And the learning overall in my experience is that technology is not the problem. Technology is neutral. So it depends on the context you're using this technology. Think as a simple kitchen knife. You can use your kitchen knife for cutting your vegetables or killing your kids. It depends on the context and the usage you have. So, and the same is within 5G or AI technologies. It depends on the context. And yes, there is a ethical debate raising up more than in the past. And I think it makes sense because you have so much complexity in your system. Will you do everything? And you are losing a bit of your control in details of processing steps, which means some decisions are made by systems on their own, depending on their configuration. But at the end, those systems are more or less in a box. It's a far complex box, but it's boxed. And the way we try to deal with this is rising up the standards out of the GDPR and following the principles of transparency. I want to know, as a data subject, if my data is processed by an artificial intelligence. And I want to have a place where I can raise my questions and where I can make my interventions if something is wrong and I'm not fine with decisions made by a machine. This is the idea we are following, combining data privacy requirements, which are more or less standard, with ethical requirements, which are coming up new in the company and are developed. And we have to make our experiences with both of them and combine them in a meaningful way together. That's it for the first round from my side.
Thank you, Frank. Let's go to you, Dario.
Well, thanks, Graham. We at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, we are a trade association, and for the last 20 years we've been looking at topics. I'm very happy that Mikko was pointing at the word ecosystem as the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. We really try to bring people together and to try to discuss some of these key questions. And Frank was talking about it. Sometimes the technology can be neutral, but the consequences of the technology can be pretty important. And that's, we take some time and we're trying to do that. We look at 5G as an incredible opportunity for the industry. However, we also believe that sometimes we overhype our expectations. And it might take some years for some of the exciting services to really take place. And part of our members would say that overall, 5G is a transport layer, and all of the excitement for personal data is on the service layer, which happens on top. However, there comes a surprise. We're also thinking that there is probably going to be a big slap in the face for a lot of companies that are given by 5G, not because of the new issues that is bringing forward. There is little that is new, theoretically, something that the GDPR approach might have not helped you to think about, but the quantity. So a lot of people have looked at GDPR merely as a simple interpretation and checklist of what to do, rather than asking back those fundamental questions we've heard from Vodafone and from Deutsche Telekom as well right now. And those is the key question. So if you haven't entangled yourself and understood what data is, the new data economics, the new data architecture, then the amount of data that 5G might generate will really be surprising you in the bad way. So here we go. 5G was not supposed probably to be a big data discussions, but it's going to be a big data discussions, we think.
Thank you, Dario. And Eamon, moving over to you from the University of Bath, what's your view from the AI side particularly, and also from this 5G?
Yeah, so thanks, Graham. So I'm Director of UK Research and Innovations Centre for Doctoral Training in Accountable, Responsible and Transparent AI, which mercifully we can just refer to as ART-AI. My background is actually in the field of human-computer interaction, which is primarily about designing and evaluating novel interactive systems. Although as a field, it's sometimes seen too narrowly as about designing and evaluating interactive artifacts or devices like a handset or a computer. These kind of devices are important, but they're only part of a system. And taking a systemic view, we should really care about are these devices that we're designing and distributing, and the various intelligent agents that use them. And originally that was just human agents, but now we also have artificially intelligent agents, and the connections amongst all of these components of this system. And of course, 5G is about bigger, better, faster connections. But for me, 5G doesn't actually change anything fundamentally about privacy and ethics. Even if we assume that 5G will make big quantitative differences, speed of connection, ubiquity of devices, ubiquity of connections, changes in computation, and the sheer amounts of data collected and used, and these changes lead to and enable deeper qualitative changes in what we can do, even then, fundamental principles of what we should do should still apply. So engineering, science, design, mathematics can tell us only what we can do, not what we should do. So for me, the real question is, how do we collectively, as a society, propose, negotiate, agree, implement and enforce these fundamental principles, ideally in ways that don't have to be renegotiated and substantially changed every time there's another innovation.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. So no, it's a really good start, because it gives a view in terms of, yes, scale, speed, but also, as you said, Dario, things, are going to take time for it to come through. And as you say, Eamon, it's fundamentals as well that should still apply, which is absolutely right. And as you say there, Frank, enhancing GDPR and building on that transparency, all of these things ring very true. Now, if I bring this to Vodafone and to Deutsche Telekom in terms of any specific things you're doing in preparation for 5G in your particular areas, is there anything you'd like to share with us, activities that you've initiated or things that you're working on? Let's maybe start there. Again, I'll start with you, Mikko.
Thanks. Very, very happy to. IoT was mentioned. I have two examples here. So one is on IoT, consumer IoT in particular. So that would be an example of an ecosystem where you have the device manufacturers, the application providers, the telcos, perhaps other partners as well, delivering value to customers, consumers in our case. So as we were working or have been working on executing our consumer IoT strategy, one of the things we wanted to really focus on is to sort of like make sure that the ecosystem ends up being what we call trust by design. So not just privacy by design, but trust, so legally, consumer protection, these things all taken into account. So basically what it meant for us is that we work together with Consumer International, which is an NGO, to work out sort of like rules that you would have to adhere to in these different roles if you wanted to, be part of that offering, part of that offering. So basically, we have like privacy design patterns for IoT mobile applications or IoT devices. Very simple things. For example, if your device has a camera, there has to be a visual indicator that it's on. Everyone kind of like knows this. But there would be quite a few, device manufacturers out there who don't necessarily adhere to these, what many would consider best practices. So that's one effort that we've been pushing for. Perhaps more in the kind of like on the network side of things. So COVID is a case in point. So many of you may be aware that the telco networks data, many companies have service offerings to create anonymous and aggregated statistical information on population level movements. So Vodafone was one of those companies, or is one of those companies. So we provided these anonymous insights to public authorities to try to understand how effective the lockdown, for example, might be. So quite a lot of privacy, cyber consideration went in there to make sure that the data that we provide really is sufficiently anonymous and so forth. Maybe that's a topic for another discussion. But we did add a layer of data ethics to it. So we have this sort of like when I mentioned that our challenge is operationalizing privacy and ethics. So we try to create. We have this framework that we call human impact assessment. So it's an attempt to build on Frank, what you were saying, that it's actually about GDPR in a way, bringing those concepts to life. So one of the concepts in GDPR is the need to understand the impact on the rights and freedoms of individuals. And then when you look at it that way, you start to realize that, well, maybe it's the human rights conventions and other similar documents where you do get a list of what those rights and freedoms just might be. So right to life might be on top of the list, that it is for us. And then when you ask yourself a question that, might something very serious happen if we go forward this exercise, and you go sort of like you work down the list, discrimination, negative impacts on credit, all kinds of somewhat fairly and well understood known issues that may happen, sort of like harms, threats to individuals. You can standardize it, and you can add a layer of predictability to it. So the difficulty is in getting that framework done, and then now we're trying to get better in using it. So that's one example. We use it in our big data analytics, for example.
No, that's great. And Frank, what about you and Deutsche Telekom?
Yeah, interesting topics you're rising up, Mikko. I think we have similar approaches. I would not say identical approaches, but similar things. We are running a privacy by design approach a long time before GDPR came up, and we have experienced consultants who are not the core privacy consultants. We call them more business impact consultants or business model consultancy, not only core privacy consultancy, because it's the question how you make business by creating your systems or your products in a way that works and which is most efficient for business without tackling in a negative manner requirements from privacy. So you have to look for solutions. And of course, our consultants have the position to raise up different requirements and different perspectives. For instance, if I come back to 5G, there is an opportunity in 5G which is called exact positioning, I guess, where you can locate devices on a scale of in centimeters, not in meters or more by technology. So, question is, for an app developer, what kind of granularity do you use for a location system? If I want to develop a weather forecast application, it's not necessary to locate me that exact in such an exact way. It's just necessary to know in which town I am, but not exactly I am in my living room or in my kitchen at my home. And so we need things to differentiate those technologies and not use, or in every case I use exact positioning, for instance. This would be the wrong way. And if I ask the business owner of a weather forecast app, is it necessary to know if I am in the living room or in the kitchen? He would answer no. So I have to look for another opportunity which has less impact on my privacy. So this is the case from my perspective, to differentiate between use cases, and this is what I meant in a contextual view, how to use technology.
No, it's very good. And I think what you're saying really is that even the data protection principles out of GDPR still very much are going to apply through into 5G, because you're talking on location, so things like purpose limitation and proportionality. So ensuring that you can only use the data which is proportional to the purpose. So all of these things will apply, probably even more so as the technology is advancing, like you're saying, and you're getting more accurate location. Thank you, Frank. Okay, so Dario, let's talk a little bit about your members then, and things that's happening within that your trade association. Then, can you give us a bit more insight into some of the things that you're looking at?
Absolutely. So starting with who are the members of MEF, and that's quite a diverse bunch. That's what we like, being an ecosystem representation. So we have mobile operators, but equally we have banks, software companies, games and content providers, service layers, security applications. So you can add them all together. They all contribute to these big discussions. It is a big discussion, and it sometimes has to go down vertical to specific applications. But once we talk, and we heard it from the contextualizations from Frank, but it's really some of the big principles which go back to, if you want GDPR, whether it's AI or general personal data as well. We need models which are somehow understood and can be understood to have a conversation, and a wider conversation, because it cannot be a silo. It cannot be something that happens within my company and then I'll just goodbye, somebody else will work about the rest. It has to be fully understood by all of the companies and people that data will be touched and used, etc. So those principles are not easy to find, but we like to have a very difficult conversation, and we start with the consumers. So for the last 7 years, that's really what our members have keen and wanted to do, is to take the consumer trust check. We call it consumer trust, a big survey global, and the news are not great. So to be frank, I mean, we've heard some wonderful stories from probably the last from Miko and Frank. They seem to be proactive, but the users worldwide are pretty concerned. And if we have to go back to the main reason for this concern, because the ethics might be a difficult, challenging concept to define itself, but we think it's transparency of purpose. We don't know what the data that's been collected has been used for, and that creates this sense of lack of control. And control itself, the second part, is a control that, can you delete this data? Can I have this one? Can please? Which is also the data portability. If it's mine as well, please give me a copy. And finally, it's a question of security. It's actually the biggest question right now, security, because all of this data seems to be lost and percolating everywhere, and people want to say, are you doing the right thing? Are you treasuring it? Are you saving it? Now, if we look at these 4 components, these are the main things that we seem our members, they all say we all have our component parts in making sure that this actually is represented, and the consumers overall come back and trust us. The last words that I would say, the reason why everybody is in it together, we measure the amount of lost opportunity, whether it's not buying something online or mobile, not using a service, that is growing year on year. So there is 30 to 40% of your users that are deciding not to do because of the impact of personal data on mobile. And that is a big amount that possibly might be used by the entire economy, and personal data may really unlock the potential of additional value for all.
But Dario, I remember that this survey that you run has been done a number of years, hasn't it? So, it's been done sort of, even before the introduction of the GDPR from the 25th of May 2018. So have you seen any change as companies have been more transparent and, have to show their accountability and open up to their customers? Have you seen any improvement, or do you see it still continuing?
I would say it still continues. Some of the things have been very interesting to track. Consumers have become much more aware of it, and possibly in Europe, maybe the GDPR discussions really helped make a spike in those years. I think 2017, 2018 have been critical years. The number of consumers that would have defined themselves as actively doing something to protect themselves went from a small 20% quite quickly to 56, 70%, 80% now. And why is that? Those were the years of the big scandals. The Facebook scandal, but as well the scandals of your hotel, your airlines losing some of the data which impacted you as well. And again, it's security as well as privacy. The two things can come hand in hand. So a good question, Graham. And that's why I say things are not getting better. So GDPR has been implemented, but the sense of trust has got worse. I'll just tell you the last element, if you want. The consumers trust personal data in the end of myself, 53%. And that was last year was a jump of 13% percentage point. So massively lack of trust in the system. And that overall is across the sector. Mobile operators, 13% of people would say they would trust mobile operators with data. Which is not particularly a big drop down. We've seen everybody else drop in, and even trust in the government is going down. So within personal data, we do have a systemic challenge. People don't trust almost anybody now.
But it's an ongoing. Let's say the people who work in privacy, and a lot of these people in this call do, as you know, work every day to try to continue to drive and improve and to build on that capability and ensure that their customers are protected and are transparent. So it is an ongoing battle. And as we move into 5G, with, as we were just saying, all of these additional datas and technologies and applications, obviously that battle will continue, if not get even higher. So it will keep us busy in the privacy area for a long time, I'm sure. Now moving over to Eamon. So you're building up, you're developing out the future of people who will be developing AI. So your students are going to be the future that builds out these great new things that we hear about that will be coming with the technology as well. So in this area, Eamon, it'd be great to get your view there about how you're teaching your students. What is the message you're giving to them? How are you bringing them out into the marketplace so that they're going to develop this AI in a responsible way, particularly with 5G in mind?
So what I can say for certain is that what we're not going to see anytime soon is artificial general intelligence. So we talk a lot about AI, and to some people the holy grail of that is artificial general intelligence, where we have machines or networks of machines that think like people. That's not going to happen anytime soon. And what we're more likely to see, driven by things like 5G, is significant advances in very specific data-driven applications of what we currently call AI. And of course, a few years down the line, we probably won't call it AI. We'll probably just treat it as we do, the fax machine 20 years ago, or the phone right now. How can 5G impact that? Well, it cuts both ways. AI can help advance 5G, and 5G can help advance AI. And the usual example of the latter is that 5G equals more data, and that in turn equals better models and predictions, and that in turn equals better data. And we can probably accept that, but there's an unheard criticism of data-driven AI, that it's a black box. So there are increasing calls for transparency, and that's why the title of our centre is what it is. It's accountable, responsible, and transparent AI. And notwithstanding it's a very long title, and we try to squeeze in quite a few things, I'm still not entirely happy with it, because transparency per se is not enough. It's kind of a necessary thing if we're going to make AI more responsible and make the people who are engaged with AI more accountable. But per se, it's not enough. Transparency is often linked to things like accountability and responsible use of AI. But it's not just a nice goal from an ethical or regulatory perspective. It could have potentially significant functional performance benefits for 5G, and maybe we can get onto that in a while. But in our centre, in our AI, we're training what we like to call specialists with perspectives. And we dreamed up that strapline to reflect specifically that we're taking people from right across different disciplinary boundaries. It's a bit, again, like the diversity argument. That's essential. So our AI is very deliberately a collaboration across computer science, engineering, humanities, social scientists, and we bring together PhD students that we're training, academic researchers at the University of Bath, and we've got partners from industry, NGOs, other international universities, but from right across this diverse background. And the specialists with perspectives things reflects that we're not naive enough to believe that we can train these people to be experts in everything. We are trying to create the next generation of specialists in their particular discipline. So we have people training in robotics, we have people training in machine learning, we have people training in public policy. But the crucial element is that interdisciplinarity, where we bring them together and they're able to communicate and collaborate effectively with people from these other areas. Because too often, with the best will in the world, people want to be interdisciplinary, they want to collaborate, and they simply cannot talk to each other. They can't communicate, they don't have the common ground. So key to what we're trying to do here is create the next generation of leaders of AI who can do that, who are specialists, but have sufficient awareness and grounding in other disciplines that they can communicate and collaborate effectively with other people.
Yes, and let's hope that you're building it. I know you are, as we work together, the privacy and ethics by design into that training, so that's kind of already instinctive and natural for them as they build out AI for the future.
Yeah, that's absolutely core to our approach. So just earlier today, I shared a talk by one of our partners who's an applied ethicist. And the theme of the session today was doing right and being good. What is ethics and why worry? So it was really the fundamentals of ethics going right back, literally thousands of years, but then making it contemporary. And he's actually coming back in a couple of weeks to then build on that and talk about how that relates explicitly to current technology and AI. So absolutely, that whole piece around ethics is absolutely core to everything. We did originally have ethics in the title, but we got rid of it, partially because the title is clearly already too long, but also because we didn't want it to be seen as yet another thing we look at. We want it to be implicit and inherent in everything we do.
That's brilliant. I fully get that. Okay, so we're going to, in a minute, see if anyone's got any questions. So from the audience side, we've been talking for a while now, and if there's any key questions, I know that we'll try and pick them up before the end. Before I hand over to questions, though, if I just go back to all of you panelists, we can talk about anything else that you might be doing in particularly this area of AI. But if there's anything else you want to add in, any other things you would like to share or thoughts from the discussion we've just had, I'll leave it open to you now if you'd like to come forward and speak. Nico?
I would maybe have one, and this is perhaps also a question to Eamon. A lot of these sort of like challenges happen not the problems are not created by privacy professionals. They come up in the work that people like data scientists and technologists and engineers are doing. It was quite inspiring what you were saying. Just would be very curious to hear your experiences on sort of like how attractive this topic is to the people that you work with.
We've got some fairly objective metrics on how attractive it is. So our centre was set up as part of the UK government's industrial strategy around AI, which it published a couple of years ago. And there are a number of these centres around the UK, and all the figures that we've seen would suggest we are outstripping the other centres by an order of magnitude in applications, for example. So people are very, very keen to engage in this area. Of course, the downside of that is in the end, we take on a small proportion of these people, but hey, it's a good problem to have, and it does show that there's a lot of interest out there.
Okay. So, Miko, you're muted.
I was just saying that's really encouraging, and I think it's key that these various regimes work together and try to solve the problems.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think my favorite student feedback ever was from just about this time last year, where I had a comment from one of them which said, and I quote, "Why are we doing this? Engineers don't need ethics." So, there's a long way to go, but we're getting there.
It's great to hear. Okay, well, look, we've got about 4 minutes left. Is there any other comments there, or should we see if we can take a question? Anyone else want to comment before we go to questions?
I'll just probably follow up on what Iman's saying, and I like the comment from do your engineers need ethics? Well, I think we had an internal discussion between the creativity of a black box, which is how do you let them play with data, and I think we came to what is a pragmatic, we hope, conclusion, which is very important to focus on the input of what information and what personal data gets to reach them, and then the output, and what are the categories which are allowed versus not allowed on what you should be talking about, in terms of medical, in terms of importance of life, in terms of financial security, etc. All of those discussions is what we'd like to have. We do leave the black box in between, and maybe some of the engineering, the creativity of the algorithm and the learnings to happen separate. But that shouldn't take away the input and the output and the view that we need to have on both of those.
Fantastic. Any other, or should we take a question? We've only got about 3 minutes left. So is there a pertinent question, or?
Well, we have a little time buffer anyways, so we have in total about 7 minutes left. There are actually rather many, I would say more like comments there, so it would be nice if you could then in written form answer them. One of the things you already touched upon is the precise location that 5G networks would allow. Considering the little coverage that one cell can cover. So any thoughts on this? Is that a threat that the society should think about and be worried?
So from my perspective, this is not a threat. It's once again, it's a question of the context where you use this functionality or not. It's a question. Is this a mandatory thing where every device is at every moment in time strictly located or not? Can you use this functionality on demand when it's necessary to have a precise location? Then you use it, and when it's not necessary, you shouldn't use it at all.
Mikko here from Vodafone. I would share the same view. So, has GPS location been a threat? That's the question we should be asking. Of course, it's about how you use it, how you make it available to others. If for example, that sort of information would be freely available from the network to everyone who wants to see it, that of course would not be a very good thing. So we need to make sure that we have the right controls built into this kind of ecosystem that we are moving towards, where these questions become highly relevant.
And that's the problem with ethics in general. The answer is never yes or no. It depends, and usually it depends on the context. Some of you may have seen that recent Netflix documentary on the social dilemma, and it did have impact, but it would have been a more compelling narrative if it had been more balanced, because it talked about threats, but it talked primarily about threats in terms of what the companies do. But there are many players in this ecosystem. So there are companies, there are individual users, and each of them has different responsibilities. So I think whether or not something becomes a threat or a benefit depends on how those different kinds of players meet their own responsibilities and probably are regulated.
Well, I think that's all about the responsibility, and I think that a lot of companies are responsible. I think the big difference now is you have to demonstrate it, and you have to be able to justify and show an accountability for it. And obviously, in that documentary, you had lots of people speaking there. And I think in the future, like we're looking at AI, how do people document? Like with the exam, fiasco that happened with the algorithms. This will continue, and this is why, from an ethics point of view, there's going to be a demand to be able to show and demonstrate and justify the bias or fairness that's being applied in the future. I'd like to hear other views there. Yeah.
So one thing is companies, the other thing is government and law enforcement institutions. For example, in Latvia, when the COVID wave came in March, there were cases, and due to the lockdown, police was controlling, people gathering and illegally, and if they were, police was gathering data from mobile operators and arrived at those places and said, "Hey guys, this is not allowed to be, together." So, not sure if I'm very comfortable with this. That without my consent, my operator provides data to law enforcement. Any comments on this? Or is just for the greater benefit of the society?
I think that if I may, that there is a discussion in each of the government and countries, which is back to the legislative and the government branches as well. So it needs to be a contract with society, and your law actually help us to identify what is required by every operators, etc., and or the law enforcement, what they are allowed to go and see, and they should be transparent, which is a great view. So the citizen can see the value versus the cost of them, because there is a trade-off at some point, and each society organization might need to come to that discussion at one point. In our point, as I say, the trade association working across global, we can see how the concepts of the ethics are different, and the trade-offs are different in some countries. In Asia, we might see a more applicability to the good for society. People are above the libertarian. We see in some other countries will say, I'd rather preserve the right for me to give this information. And that's a debate that's going to happen across the different countries. And that's a welcome debate. I think that's what we should probably have and make it transparent and renovate this contract with different parts of the population and say, this is what we've done. Are you happy with it? So I think it's actually a positive incitation to actually be more transparent in what happens with data right now.
Any other last comments?
Well, I think that the notion of is it okay if it's for the greater good? I mean, that's the old utilitarian view of ethics, which is starting to look a little bit long in the tooth. And Dario was absolutely right. We need to look upwards and outwards. Each society, each country will take a view on this. And they may not all be the same view, but it would be good for us to talk to each other across those boundaries, especially given that it's a global marketplace.
All right, gentlemen. In the end, there's a small present to you that we will share via email with you. So it's a picture. It's a drawing. An artist named Harry's made this picture for you in this discussion. So this is
brilliant. Well, let me maybe just close this up then. And also, I wanted to very much thank the panelists. Really, I mean, this whole topic, I mean, obviously, privacy and ethics is going to be continuing. As we said before, it's going to be something as the technology continues and it will go into 6G. The foundations and the principles are in place, and we will have to work to keep up and to ensure always that that we're making and protecting our customers, our employees, etc., our individuals and society as a whole. So thank you very, very much. This has been a great input, great content. I really appreciate your time. And thank you to the audience for your participation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. All right, we shall continue in 5 minutes. And the next topic will be dedicated to Innovation districts, are they worth what they promise? So are innovation districts worth the hype? That's the topic of our next presentation in 5 minutes. See you then.
We are the Riga Freeport, the one that borders the European Union and Russia. The world may have seen bigger ports, but when it comes to quality, whether it be our team, technology, or logistics, not many ports have the same standards as we do. We will be glad to work with you and support you in developing infrastructure. We will meet and guide your ships to the pier, and we will send them to their next destination. Riga Freeport. Big in business, big in quality.
Over the horizon, in what is tomorrow, lies the unknown. Applications we can't imagine today will change the way we live and suddenly become the norm. 5G is the path forward. However, it requires a staggering investment that means missteps aren't an option. Cisco provides the most important pieces of that investment: a flexible software-based service creation platform, security, and automation. Pay-as-you-grow licensing removes the risk in your journey to 5G and gives you the agility to move quickly. With a proven, open, and cloud-native architecture designed for now and the future, you get best-in-class network scaling that is simple and automated. proprietary barriers disappear and new revenue opportunities open. Services can be deployed when and where customers need them. Only Cisco provides innovative technology leadership that spans network operators, enterprises, the public sector, IoT, and web providers, bringing the expertise and security to support you every step of the way. With a flexible cloud-to-client approach, you can be ready to provide the unimagined. Between the needs of today and the trajectory of tomorrow, there's a bridge. Cisco, the bridge to possible.